Beautiful. Thank you so much. You're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Shabbos, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's shir, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan Haba Lin Latova, Stephen Terry Zinn, with gratitude to Hashem as they welcome their fifth grandchild, Gavriel Amichai Zinn, and in memory of Dr. Zinn's mother, Doris Zinn Devora Bas, Rabbi Shmuel Yoel, on the occasion of our fourth yard site. And Shandi and Avram Kelman, in creation of the yard site of Avram's father, Rafal Yechiel ben Avram, Zichron Livracha, and our week of learning sponsors, Hilary Jacobson Kent, in memory of her daughter, Shifra, Zichron Livracha, Bas Chanadina. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamos, Lavan Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all of our hostages will, Emir Hashem, be returned to their families, B'Shalom and B'Karav, and our soldiers will be successful, B'Chol Ma'aseh Yedehem. But so with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Baruch Hashem, today's daf is Kuf Daled 104, and we are picking up on Kuf Gimel Beis 103b at the two dots. About 4 lines up from before it gets wide. Kashim shecholkin b'tvua kach cholkin b'teven u'b'kash. So remember again, we're speaking about different arrangements, different agricultural arrangements. Remember again that the Mishnah introduced us to 2 different arrangements. One is called an arisus, and one is called a chachirus. So remember again, arisus is where the sharecropper agrees to go ahead and give the farmer a percentage of the total crop, versus chachirus, where again the farmer is agreeing to go ahead and pay the landowner a fixed amount. Right, so what the field produces doesn't produce. Ultimately, again, the chocher is on the hook for the total amount. So the Gemara goes weiter. So the Gemara says that the same way that they go ahead and they split the crop, they also go ahead and split the teven, the straw, and kash, and the stubble. Amar Rabbi Yosef, beBavel mehigu lo yavi tivna la'arisei. In Bava, the minhag was that they would not give straw to the sharecropper. The sharecropper straw wasn't included in the sharecropping arrangement. Sharecropper wouldn't get the benefit from it. So what is okay, that's interesting, but we've already established that everything that we're talking about over here is based on minhag hamakom, is based on what's normally done. So in Bava they didn't give straw to the sharecropper. So what exactly is that teaching me? So the Gemara says, so it's actually a very profound idea to teach us that if halacha l'maisa, you're in Bavel, and the landowner does give you straw, that just to understand, that's ayin yafeh, that's a generous person, and therefore, again, do not extrapolate what is common practice from this individual's actions. So this is fascinating. So in other words, the Gemara says, in Bavel, they don't give sharecropper straw. That's not part of the arrangement. Okay, the Gemara says, why are you telling me this? We've already established whatever minhag hamakom is minhag hamakom. So if that's minhag hamakom in Bavel, fine. You don't have to explicitly articulate it. So which the Gemara says, so understand that if you're a sharecropper in Bavel, and the landowner gives you straw, that's not the norm. Rather, he's an exceptionally generous person, and do not go ahead and learn from this person's behavior about what the norm is. Right? Fascinating. So I think that there's a tremendous Moshe Haskell in this as well. What the Gemara is teaching us is that at the end of the day, don't expect the world to be generous to you. This is incredibly important, that sometimes we go through life and we expect generosity. We expect generosity from the other, we expect generosity from the world. Don't expect generosity. Generosity is not the default. Generosity is an exception, not the rule. And now again, I'm not talking about necessarily how we deal with each other, because as a people we are obligated to be generous with one another, but sometimes we go through life and we expect ayin yafeh. We expect people and we expect the world to deal with us just in a gracious and generous manner. And then when that doesn't happen, which most of the time it does not happen, we feel profoundly let down and disillusioned. Instead, the Gemara understands, no. Don't go through life expecting generosity. Just the opposite. Go through life. I don't know what's the opposite of generosity. Stinginess. All right. Don't go through life expecting generosity, because you're not going to get it. When it happens, beautiful, fantastic. But recognize that is the yotzei min haklal. That is the exception and not the rule. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amar Rav Yosef, buchra v'tifsa v'ar kafto. The kani de chazir de balabayis. So Rashi points out over here that what they used to do with around the corners of the field is that they would pile up dirt around the field in order to make a border. So the Gemara calls that, so they would pile dirt in like 3 successive stages. Those 3 successive stages were called Bukhra, Tafsa, and Arkavta. So ultimately, again, and Kani de Chizra means literally the staffs for fencing. All of this comes from the Balabayis. Okay, it's just highlighting what's the responsibility of the Balabayis. First wide line, the Chizra Gufei Da'arisei. And the thorns, in other words, I guess you would go ahead and you'd put up like the poles of the fence and some basic fencing, but then if you wanted extra security, you'd put up thorns in the fence itself. That's the responsibility of the sharecropper. Klala de Milsa, the general rule is like this. Kol ikar balma de balabayis, netirusi yisirasa de arisa. Anything that's necessary for basic security, that's on the balabayis. That's on the landowner. Anything for additional security, that's on the sharecropper. Rabbi Yosef, Mara vizavila v'davla v'zarnuka de balabayis. Literally, again, the hoe, the shovel, the pail, the smaller bucket, all of this is the responsibility of the balabayis. Arise avid beyure. The sharecropper is responsible for going ahead and digging the smaller trenches from the larger pools of water, ultimately to the field. Again, I just want to point out again, remember the caveat to all of these statements is everything is based on minhag hamakom. Everything is based on what was done, in that particular locale. So when the Mishnah espouses, when the Gemara espouses these things, this is reflecting Talmudic minhag hamakom, but obviously, again, it could change by place, it can change with time as well. So the Gemara goes weiter. Kishim shecholkin biyayin kach cholkin bizmurus bekanim. The same way that the landowner and the sharecropper share wine, so too they go ahead and they split up the zmuros are vines, kanim are the poles. Kanim ayavidite. Why bringing up kanim? Amrid b'Rabbi kanim hamichulakin kanim hamochulakin shebahen ma'amidin sagifanim. This is talking about the poles that hold up the vines. Ushneim misapkin esakanim, and ultimately again they also go ahead and split up the poles. So the Gemara, or I should say, they both provide the poles for the vineyard. Lamali. So why do you have to add in this statement? Matam kama. This is actually explaining the previous statement. Matam shnei and cholkin. Why is it that both the sharecropper and the landowner go ahead and split up? Why is it that they split up the poles? So the Gemara says, Mishum d'shneim mesapkin asakanim. So it's cause and effect. Since both landowners and sharecroppers are responsible for going in and providing the poles, therefore halacha l'mayis at the end of the crop, at the end of the harvest, they are permitted to go ahead and split up the poles, and each of them take half of the poles. Okay, beautiful. Mishnah will say the manam of 103b kov kimul beis hamakabel so the mechaberu for beis hashalchin or beis ha'ilan. Interesting case here. So we'll say a person. So let's say again, I am the farmer, and I receive a field from Ruvain, and the nature of this beis hashalchin. We'll say beis hashalchin is a field. Is beginning the first Mishnah Maseches Moekan is the beginning of a field. Is the field that is watered by irrigation. It cannot be solely sustained through rainwater. Rather, it requires irrigation. So I'm being makabel. Rashi points out over here, Beis hashalchin karka yevesha delo daye b'mei geshamim umimayon sheba mashkosa. So the way this would normally work is a beis hashalchin would have some type of water system there. Right, at least in the case of the Mishnah, there's a well on premises. So this is a field that requires irrigation, and the well for irrigation is mamish on the field itself. Or for that matter, o beis ha'ilan, or I go ahead and receive from Ruvain. Again, I will say this is only a sharecropping arrangement, or chachirus, right? And I'm receiving a field from Ruvain that has a tree on it. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. O beis ha'ilan, o b'shila ilan hahu chaviva ala aris. So this is a very beautiful Gemara. Now remember, as we saw in yesterday's daf, sharecroppers like trees when the trees are on the field. Why do they like trees? Rashi says, "Shenotel chelik beperos below torach." Because the assumption is, we'll say, so remember again, if I'm to have a wheat field from Ruvain as a sharecropper, so now I like it when there are trees. Why do I like it when there are trees? Because apparently fruit trees do not really need maintenance. They don't need maintenance. So if I'm a sharecropper, therefore Allah l'maisa, I get the benefit of the trees without the work. Without the work. I will say, I thought that this is such a beautiful. So again, so in the case of the Mishnah, I, the sharecropper, am receiving this field from Ruvain. I'm leasing the field from Ruvain. And again, either what's unique about this field is either it's an irrigation field, but the well is on premises, or it's a field with a tree. Or it's with the tree. So I will say, just before we go on, so it's interesting. So again, Rashi points out that the power of having a field with a tree is the Aris likes the tree. Why? Because with a tree, with a fruit tree, you get the benefit from the fruit, ultimately again without all of the effort. So I was thinking that, remember, so beautiful that we're learning this Gemara here on Erev Shavuos. On Erev Shavuos. So Shavuos, the Yom Tov, when we celebrate Kabbalah Satorah, we celebrate the gift that is the most incredible gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has ever given humanity, which is the gift of Torah. So we'll say, what's unique about Torah? What do we call Torah? Eitz Chaim Hi L'Machazikim Ba. Torah is also a tree. Torah is also a tree. But what's the difference between the tree of Torah and the tree of the Mishnah over here? Is, as Rashi points out, the beauty of this tree and why the farmer likes this tree is because you don't have to do any work. You could just reap the benefits, you could just reap the fruit, and you don't really have to work hard. But I will say that's not the way it works with Torah. Eitz Chaim Hi. Torah is absolutely unequivocally a beautiful tree of life, but only if what? La machazikim ba. If you're willing to hold on to it. If you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to attach yourself to it, if you're willing to toil it, if you're willing to help prune, right? You don't have to prune the tree, but you're willing to work the tree, you're willing to do the avodah, then ultimately, again, it'll give you the most beautiful and incredible and wonderful life. So the tree of the Mishnah, you can reap the benefits with absolutely below Torah, and that's why the farmer likes it. Torah, the tree of Torah can even give you even better benefits. The tree of Torah could yield even more sweeter and better and more incredible fruit, but only the machazikim ba, if you're willing to put in the work. The way it works with ruchnius is what you get out is what you are willing to put in. Let's go back there. Yava shamayon, what happens if halacha lamaisa, again, the well dries up, or the tree is cut down. So we'll say, so now something changes materially. So in other words, we'll say, I cannot deduct any money from my lease payments. So now, even though, again, the well dried up, or the tree, right, or the tree fell down, I have to pay the full lease amount, right? I the farmer, have to pay the full lease amount, and I can't deduct anything. Now, I'll say, so now, im amarlo, chachar li sada beis hashalchin, zu, o sada beis ha'ilan, zeh. But if the nature of my, now, I'll say, now that's because just the logic over here is, this is not what I stipulated with Ruvain. In other words, I leased from Ruvain a field. It happened to be, it was an irrigated field that had a well on it, or it was a field that had a tree on it. But the fact that there was a well, the fact that there was a tree, was never part of the essence of our agreement. Case number 2 in the Mishnah is, I lease a specific field. I say to Ruvain, lease me this field that is a Beis HaShalchin, that, right, this Beis HaShalchin, or lease me this field that has a tree. Yava Shamay v'niktzas ha'ilan menachalom min chachuro. We'll say in that case, if the well dries up or the tree falls down, ultimately, again, I have the ability to go ahead and deduct from the lease amount. Okay, so I'll say, so let's analyze this. Say, hey, Ridami, what's the case here? So I'll say, so obviously the distinction between the two cases in the Mishnah is that case number 1 is there is never any specific mention of the well or of the tree. Therefore, if it dries up or it falls down, I can't go ahead and deduct any amounts from my lease payment. In case number 2, there was a specific reference to the tree or to the well, and therefore if something happens, something materially changes, I have the ability to deduct money from the lease amount. So says the Gemara, Hechi Dami, what's the case? So it says, we're going to see this concept over Yontiv. But if halacha l'maisa, the reason why, let's say the irrigation ditch on the irrigation well on the field dried up is because the major river dried up. Let's say again, this wasn't an irrigation well issue, but let's say the major river which feeds everything dried up. So Rabbi say we're going to see essentially that for major events, I guess what we would call today like an act of God, right? For acts of God, right? So that I am allowed to renegotiate my rental agreements for, right? In other words, if we're talking about where the major river dried up, I should be able to go ahead and renegotiate the lease amount. So name of Makas Medinahi. So I'll say that Makas Medina literally means like a global event, or like a national event. Right? An act of God, I should be able to renegotiate. Amar Baba, Diyavish Narazuta. No. The case of Rabbi is where the smaller river, right? The smaller river, in other words, the irrigation ditch, the irrigation well, was fed by a smaller pool of water. That smaller pool is what dried up. And therefore, again, I will say, the larger body of water still exists. And therefore, again, top of Kofdalid, the Amrlay, because the landowner could say to me, I could bring water with buckets. In other words, while it's true that the irrigation ditch on the field dried up, right? And now Lamaisa, again, even the smaller pool from which it's fed dried up, the larger body of water is still there. So therefore, again, the landowner can say, listen, you still have water, okay, don't be lazy, get your bucket, go ahead and draw water and water the field like that. Amra Papa, we'll say, Kuftalim 104a, first line, Amra Papa, Hani Tarti Masnisa Kamaisa, Meshkachas La Bein Bechachrenusa, Bein Bekablenusa. We'll say the first two Mishnayos of this parak really apply both, whether you're talking about a kablanus or a chachronis. Again, remember, kablanus, typical sharecropping, where the farmer agrees to give a percentage of the total crop to the landowner, right? And a chachronos, ultimately, again, is where the farmer agrees to pay a fixed fee, a fixed amount to the landowner. So both of these Mishnayos apply to either arrangement. Mikan ve'ilach, but I will say from this point forward in the parak, so the isa bekablenusa lesa bechachrenusa, the isa bechachrenusa lesa bekablenusa. Whatever concepts we are espousing by arisus do not apply to chachronus, and whatever concepts we apply to chachronus do not apply to arisus. So again, we'll see exactly how to plug that in as we go forward. Im amar lo chachar lisada beis hashalkin zeh. So we'll say, so remember again, in the second case of the Mishnah, so I'm leasing a field. And the way it works is like this, that I say to Ruvain, go ahead and lease me this Beis HaShalchin, this irrigated field. Now, or this field with the tree. So remember again, when that happens, so the Mishnah said that if the irrigation pool dries up, or if the tree falls down, then I am permitted to go ahead and deduct money from the rental amount. So the Gemara says, V'amai, but why is that? Lema leishma ba'alma amrilach. Why can't the owner of the land say, I agree that you can go ahead and, that I would lease you this field, right, the Beis HaShalchin, but that's what we call it. In other words, the name is not meant to be topographically descriptive. Rather, the name is just supposed to be identity descriptive. Everyone calls this field the Beis HaShalchin, or everyone calls this field the Beis HaIlan. But it's not meant to be descriptive that it has an irrigation pool, nor is it meant to be descriptive that it has a fruit tree, a functional fruit tree. That's just what we call it. That's just what we call it. So why can't the landowner say to me, that's what I meant when I told you I was giving you the Beis HaShalchin? Not that it has irrigation bowl, that's the name. Or that I was giving you, again, the field with the tree. That's what we call it, the field with the tree. And therefore, even though now the pool dried up and the tree fell down, you can't go ahead and deduct any money from the rental price. So the Gemara says, Milo time did we not learn? Listen to this. Reuven says to me, I'm selling you a base core. Base core is an amount of land. Even though, again, the field is not the size of a core, ultimately the sale still stands. Why? Because I'll say, when Reuven said to me, I'm selling you a base core, that's what people called this field, a base core. It's not meant to be a specific measurement. Rather, again, it's a general statement about the field. V'hu demiskri base core. Now that works fine as long as what? As long as people actually call this field base core. In other words, if there's a sign that says "Welcome to base core," right? Then that's fine. Then the mice again. Then that works. So the Gemara says. Similarly, again, if Reuven says, I'm selling you a vineyard, right? Even though, again, there are no vines, the sale still stands. Why? Because it will say, when Reuven said he's selling you the vineyard, he didn't mean to be descriptive. Rather, that was the name that people called this field. They called this field the vineyard. The Gemara says, that's fine as long as what? As long as people actually call it the vineyard. So in other words, we'll say, so if you have a field that people call the vineyard, even though again it does not have vines. Reuven sells me the vineyard. I get there and I realize, hey, there are no vines over here. I want to claim like a mekach tal. So Reuven says, no. That's just what we call it. And as long as people actually call it that, then ultimately the sale stands. Next, Reuven says, I'm selling you an orchard. Even though there is no fruit, there are no pomegranates in this orchard. Higiu. Ultimately, again, the sale works. Why? Because ultimately, again, Reuven could claim the name of the field is called the Pardes. As long as it's actually called the Pardes, then that works just fine. So we'll say, so what do you see from here? Alma Amarle Shma Amarle Shma Ba'alma Amrilach. Hachanami Nema Shema Ba'alma Amrilach. So we'll say, therefore, again, to come full circle, the Gemara says like this. I don't understand. We just said before that if Reuven leases me the field and he says, I'm leasing you this Beis Hashalchin, this field with the irrigation field, that it's understood that it's a field with an irrigation pool, and therefore should the irrigation pool go ahead and dry out, I could go ahead and deduct money from my lease payment. But why? Why don't we just say that when Reuven said, I'm leasing you the irrigation field, that's the name of the field. That's the name of the field. And so even if the irrigation pool dries up, I shouldn't be able to deduct any money. So I'm the Chashmuel Lokashia, had the Amrele Machkir the Chocher, had the Amrele Chocher the Machkir. So we'll say, so Shmuel gives an interesting answer. Shmuel says, you're right. When can you claim it's the name of the field? That's when the landowner is saying this to the farmer, because then the landowner is going ahead and espousing the name of the field. So assuming the field is really known by this name, Einachinami, that works. But I both say, but when it's the farmer speaking to the landowner saying, I'm leasing from you a Beis Hashalchin, we assume that the landowner is that the farmer is using a descriptive term and not a name term. Not the name term. And therefore, again, if it turns out that the irrigation pool dries up or that the tree falls down, he should be able to renegotiate the terms of the lease. When it is the farmer that says this when this is the landowner who says it to the farmer, so we assume that he's using a name, a descriptive name. But when the farmer says it to the landowner, it's a hakpada. He's being makbid. He's saying, I'm leasing this field because it has a well, because it has a tree. Ravina says, not necessarily. The truth is, both cases could even be a case where the landowner says it to the farmer. But I will say, watch this. So I will say, this is very interesting. The way the Mishnah was worded was that the landowner says to the farmer, I'm leasing you, or I should say, the farmer says to the landowner, I like to lease Beis Hashalchin Zu, this irrigated field, or this field with a tree. They both say the fact that it says this, what does this mean? What does this mean? They're standing in the field. Now, if they're standing in the field, Beis Hashalchin Lamale. So I'll say, if they're standing in the field, then all the farmer needs to say to the landowner is what? Lease me this field. Why does he have to say, lease me this field with the irrigation ditch? Or lease me this field with the tree? Lama li lamemar. So it says, because clearly, again, what the farmer is saying is, lease me this field as it is in this moment. Meaning, just like right now it has an irrigation ditch, that's what I am leasing the field with. Or just like right now it has a fruit tree, which is producing fruit, that's what I am leasing this field with. Incredible. So Mishnah, let's go weiter. So we'll say, very interesting case. Interesting case. So again, I'm still the farmer, right? And I'm leasing a field from Reuven. But what did I do in this case? I let the field lay fallow. I didn't work it. It didn't work the field. So now we'll say, now remember, just to point out, I'm a sharecropper. So because I'm a sharecropper, I guaranteed Reuven a percentage of the crop. I never planted the field. So what's the halacha? So the Mishnah says, Shamin osa kama ru'uyos le'asos v'noseno. So it says, interestingly enough, so what do? We assess how much would a field like this be capable of producing, and ultimately, again, we go, I, the farmer, am obligated to pay that amount, that percentage, to Reuven. Shekach, so it says, incredible, right? So even if I fail to do the work, so what's interesting over here is as follows, right? Even though we were saying before that what's arisos? Sharecropping is I go ahead and agree to give a percentage of my crop to, or not my, of the crop to Ruvain, the landowner. But now what the Mishnah highlights is that if I'm negligent or derelict and I just don't do any work and I just leave it fallow, don't think that I'm off the hook. I still have to go, so we assess how much could a field like this produce, and I give Ruvain, the landowner, a percentage of what would have been the crop. Incredible. Shekach kosevlo, because we'll say actually this is normally actually written into the sharecropping agreement, the lease agreement. Because again, in the document we write, if I am derelict and I do not go ahead and farm the field, I will pay you from the best of the produce. So we'll say, so this is actually something that's explicitly written into the contract itself. Incredible. So I'll say, we're now interesting about Rabbi Meir Hayidorish Lashon Hedjot. We'll say, Rabbi Meir found it intriguing. It's actually interesting. Rabbi Meir used to find it intriguing to study contracts, specifically the way the common people wrote contracts. So remember again, Hedyot means just the way regular, everyday people are writing contracts that are not necessarily contracts written in a Beis Din. They're just agreements written between people using almost like the vernacular, just the way that common people spoke. So Rabbi Meir, Rashi says over here, Sher Gilu Hadyotos Lichtov Shelo Ketakanas Chachamim Hayadorish Haloshon Lifsok Hadin Acharav. Now I will say, so remember again, you don't need to go to Beis Din to write a contract, right? Two people write a contract between each other. So Rabbi Meir used to be very intrigued just by the contracts that were made between individuals outside of the purview of Beis Din, and he used to like to understand the deeper, I don't mean like the esoteric meaning, but just he used to like to understand what the parties meant in their simple contracts. The Sanya is incredible. Rabbi Meir Omer, Im over velo avir shalim ameta. For example, I will say, one of the things Rabbi Meir found is that people used to write sharecropping arrangements. They said, the farmer would write, if I leave the land fallow and don't do anything, ashalim b'meitva. Literally, I will pay you with the best. Now I will say, now that term, I'll pay you with the best, what does that mean? So the Mishnah explains what it means, that we assess how much would a field like this be capable of producing, and ultimately, again, what percentage normally would a sharecropper give to the landowner, and that's what the sharecropper is going to be on the hook for. Rabbi Yehuda Yidarish Lashon Hedyot. So Rabbi Yehuda also liked doing this. He also used to dash in Lashon Hedyot, which means just the common Lashon that the regular people would use in their contracts. The Sanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, was very interesting halacha. Adam maybe carbon asher alishto. So we'll say there are certain karbanos that, depending on your financial status, you'd have to bring, right? And there are some karbanos, if you're wealthy, you bring one type of carbon. If you're poor, you bring a different type of carbon. Now, we'll say, the Gemara says as follows, that ultimately, again, a man is obligated to provide for his wife's karbanos, and when he provides for his wife's karbanos, he has to bring her the carbon as if she's wealthy. Now, what does that mean? What it means is the wife's carbon has to go ahead and mirror her husband's financial standing. What's the pshat? Rashi points out a very critical like this. Imagine the following situation. Reuben is married to Rachel. Rachel has to bring a carbon. So now again, Rachel has to bring one of those carbonos for which there's a range. So Reuben can say, look, Rachel doesn't really have that many assets to her name. Right? After all, again, most of the property is my property. She has her ksuva property. But Lamaisa, again, I have the rights of usage. So it could be that legally she's poor. So because legally she's poor, therefore I could bring her a carbon on it, which the Gemara says, no, it's not the way it works. Right? Your wife's financial status is your financial status. Right? And therefore, again, Allah Lamaisa, whatever type of carbon you would bring is the type of carbon that you have to bring for her as well. B'chin kol carbon v'carbon she chayeves. And so too, again, a husband is obligated to provide for every carbon that his wife is obligated to bring. Shekach kosef lo, because in fact this is what he writes for an ksuva. Achrayes de islech alai min kadamas dina. By the way, not only that, but even if a wife enters into marriage and there are carbonic responsibilities upon her, meaning let's say she was obligated to bring carbonos even before they got married, husband has an obligation to provide for those carbonos. Why? Because that statement is actually written into the ksuva itself. Okay, Hillel so we'll say Hillel, this is fascinating Gemara as well. Hillel the elder also used to like to look just at the verbiage of contracts between regular people. Tisanya, we'll say this is pretty wild. The men of Alexandria, Jews, the men of the Jewish men of Alexandria, would betroth their wives. Do kiddushin. And remember again, two parts to marriage, erusin or kiddushin and nisuin. A right kiddushin established or effected through giving the wife and a woman an item of value. At that point, they're married, but they can't live with each other. Nisuin only comes about under the chuppah. Okay, so watch this. So the men of Alexandria would be makadesh their wives. They would give them a ring or item of value. Or b'shatz knisas in the chuppah, at the time when it was time for them to come to the chuppah, bo'in achirin v'chotfin osan mehen. Wow, other men would swoop in and marry these women. So we'll say now, at first glance, this is highly problematic, right? Why? Because we'll say, if you can't marry a woman after she has kiddushin with someone else, right? So just imagine this scene for just a moment, right? So Ruvain gave kiddushin to Rachel, right? Gave her item of value, affected kiddushin. They can't live together as husband and wife yet, but he gave her kiddushin. They're waiting to go to the chuppah. Literally again, right as she's about to go to the chuppah, Shimon comes along. I guess makes a better offer, right? Shimon comes along and she marries Shimon, and this was common practice happening in Alexandria. So now she marries Shimon. They have kids. Beautiful. Everyone lives happily ever after, except that what? The house is filled with little mamzerim, right? So again, so the problem is now you have a major mamzer issue. So the Gemara says, "Ubikshu chachamim lasos b'nei mamzerim." Chazal said again, it's besides the fact that the whole thing is strange, right? But lamaisa again is mamzeros. So Amrullah and Hillel Zakin said, no. Heviu l'ksuvas imchem. So Hillel said to these. So now we'll say. So apparently. The adults involved didn't care all that much about this problem, right? So in other words, that apparently Rachel was marrying Shimon, and Shimon didn't care about the kiddushin of Ruvain, and Rachel didn't seem to care about the kiddushin of Ruvain. So the adults, but who did care? The kids, because the kids obviously again are tremendously worried about being categorized as mamzerim. Hillel says, "All right, calm down. Bring me your mother's ksuva. Bring me your ksuva." And I will say, now here's what's interesting. He was saying, what was he asking for? He says, find me the ksuva ultimately again that she had from Ruvain, right? The first husband was Makadisher. So the Gemara says, "Heviu lo ksuvas iman umatza shakasu bahen lechishetik nisi lechupa havi lili into." So I will say, so this is fascinating. Apparently in Alexandria, the way it worked was like this: every kiddushin was a conditional kiddushin. What does that mean? That they used to write in their ksuvas that ultimately, again, you will be mikudeshes to me when you come to the chuppah. So I'll say, so apparently what they did is they had almost like a conditional kiddushin. So the way it would work was like this. Although Ruvain gave Rachel kesef for kiddushin sometime earlier on, but the effectiveness of that kiddushin was conditional upon getting to the chuppah. Once you come to the chuppah, so the kiddushin that I gave you will be retroactively valid. So therefore I will say, if Rachel never comes to the chuppah with Ruvain, therefore what? There's no kiddushin. Because there's no kiddushin, when she ends up marrying Shimon, there's no mamzer's problem. So we'll say, so it's interesting. I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. So because they had this problem, did they write this in their ksuvas, or they're writing this in their ksuvas all the time? Which I will say, actually, if you think about it, is actually a really brilliant idea. Because I will say, what else does this help with? What this helps with is, if a couple has kiddushin, but doesn't end up getting married with nisuin, you don't have to worry about a get, right? Because normally the halacha is, after kiddushin, if a couple chooses not to move forward with nisuin, the wife still requires a get, and now she's a grusha. One of these cases where she's a psula, but she's a grusha. So I will say, so the way to obviate that issue is to go ahead and say that really kiddushin is predicated al t'nai of nisuin. So therefore, if she never comes to the chuppah, then retroactively the kiddushin was never valid. Okay, interesting idea. In any event, the point is there's no mamzeros issue. Baruch Hashem. Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha hayadarish lashon hedjot. Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha also used to like the lashon of the, right, the way common people wrote contracts, the sanya. Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha omer, hamavas chavero, lo yimashkinanu yoser mechovo. Both in general, if you lend money to someone, you should not take collateral that is worth more than the actual value of the debt. Shekach kosev lo, because this is what we write in a document. Tashlemusa de islach alai, kol kabel dichi. Right, the obligation you have to pay me back. Ultimately, again, I have received in the form of this collateral. Time of the cost of lahagi. Now, the reason this is true is because you write this in the document. Ha ilo kasav lehachi. But if you wouldn't write this in the document, lo kanya, you wouldn't acquire it. Rabbi Yochanan says, mashkano veheishiv lo asamashkon. Yet I will say we learned that halacha l'maisa. If you go ahead, right, a lender takes collateral. Let's see, even if some point afterwards the lender returns the collateral. Afterwards, the borrower dies, the borrower dies, shom tome al gabe banav. The lender has the ability to go ahead and take back the collateral from the sons of the deceased. The lender has the ability to take back the collateral from the sons of the deceased borrower. So you see from here that halacha l'maisa, the lender has a much stronger claim to the collateral. Amud base, ahani kasve legiron. No. This document actually, I will say, is helpful. Why? Because in the event that the collateral depreciates, ultimately, again, the lender potentially has the ability to go ahead and halacha l'maisa takes something else. Rashi says over here, top Rashi, hanik siva legiron, hashtar moel lifchos damav, im yifchesu demei amashkon, shenishtamish po halove, yifra mishar nechasav kechala kasav b'shtar. So we'll say actually the document is very helpful because should there be a depreciation of the value of the collateral, the lender will have the ability to collect payments from other sources. Rabbi Yossi, so we'll say once again, Rabbi Yossi used to enjoy studying the lashon, the wording of contracts between our agreements between everyday people. So I said the sign, Rabbi Yossi Omer, makom shnagu lasos ksuva malva, gova malva. So I'll say this is very interesting. So it used to be in some places, it's actually fascinating practice. They would make the ksuva into a loan-like arrangement. Now, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Makom shnagu lasos ksuva malba, shekoma shekasuv b'shtar ksuvasa, v'dan nedunya dan halasei be'en nasha, lebeis baila, nifraas mimenu kishenis armalo, onis garsha, keder shabalchov nifra kechol hakasu b'shtar malva, kigon shekosin ba, kimoshan kosin achrayis l'kavos life. So it's actually fascinating. So some place where they treated the ksuva essentially was like this. A woman brought in this property. Whatever property she bought was valuated. And that value essentially became now like a loan to the husband that husband has the right to use for the duration of marriage. And then upon death or divorce, he or his estate has the obligation to pay back that loan to the wife. Okay, now both say, now this is actually interesting. Now because it was treated like a loan, therefore what? Gove malva. The lender, right? The gove malva. Rashi says over here, Bal gove me'avi abbas, komasha kasa b'ksuvasa kilu aval. Now both say, if it's a loan, then the father of the wife, right? Rachel's father is going to be the lender. Reuben is going to be the borrower. So what Reuben have the ability to do is actually interesting. Reuven had the ability to essentially actually borrow the cash value of the ksuva from the father of his wife, from his father-in-law. And upon death or divorce, he would be obligated to go ahead and he or his estate and repay this amount. So the Gemara says, Lichbal gova mechza. Now here's what's interesting. Now we don't pass this, but it's still interesting enough. So we'll say, so sometimes what they would do is they would inflate the value of the ksuva. Now we'll say, why would they do that? It looks nice. Rashi says, Gova, no, not yet, sorry. No, Makom Shnagu Lichbol. Rashi says, Loshum esma shemechanesas bo kiflaim b'damav b'shil kavod v'luchtov kiflaim b'ksuvasa. So I will say, so again, it was common, or at least in certain locales, they would inflate the value of the ksuva, sometimes even doubling the amount of the ksuva, because it just looks nice, but it's important. Lichbal gova mechza. And both obviously, if we're talking about a situation where the husband is actually going to borrow money from his father-in-law, corresponding to the amount of the ksuva, so obviously in a place where they would double the ksuva, you're only going to collect half of that amount. Nar beloi, gavu tilsa. In that nar beloi, they would triple the amount of the ksuva. Mereimar magbina mishvacha. So what said Mereimar would also go. It's interesting. Mereimar would say that whatever is written in the ksuva, that's what you're liable for. So apparently Mereimar, even though people would clearly inflate the amount of the ksuva, Mereimar would base liability based on the amount of the actual that's written in the ksuva. Only Ravina Mereimar va'tanya lichbal gova mechza. Ravina says, remember, how do you do that? If you know that you're inflating the numbers, why would you make the husband responsible for an inflated number? So we actually saw this in yesterday's daf. We'll say it depends on the case. Where there was an actual side kinyan, an actual formal kinyan, that's where ultimately, again, the husband would be liable even for the inflated amount, because he's being makabel kinyan for that. If he's makabel kinyan, if he makes a kinyan and he obligates himself, whatever you obligate yourself to is what you obligate yourself to. It's inflated. If you obligate yourself to an inflated amount, that's what you're obligated to. Versus where he did not make a secondary formal kinyan, in which case he would not be obligated to the informal amount. Incredible. Ravina mishabach uksiv lebarte. Ravina will say when he would write a ksuva for his daughter, in other words, when they would evaluate the amount, he would inflate the value. So Ravina inflated the value of the property going to his daughter. Amrulay nikni mine. So ultimately, again, the husband and I guess his lawyer said, okay, let's make a kinyan on this. So the Gemara says, nikni mine demar. Amrulay imikna lo michbal. If you're going to make a kinyan, I'm not inflating the numbers. Imichbal lo mikne. And if I inflate the numbers, I'm not doing a kinyan. As well say, so Ravina was very smart. Ravina knew that if they would do a formal kinyan, then what would happen? Then ultimately, again, he would be liable for this amount. So therefore, he said, listen, I'm happy to inflate the numbers of the ksuva to make it look nice. But lamaisa, again, I'm not being makabel kinyan. Because if there's kabbalah kinyan, I'll actually be liable for this. Incredible. Ho gavra. There was a guy, Havu la arba meazuzi labarti biksuvasa shala. So we'll say this is biksuvasa. So we'll say this is an interesting case. Right? There was a guy. Now we'll say Rashi points out over here. Hahu da'amruluhu mitzave machmas misahaya. So we'll say this guy was dying. So we'll call him father. Right? Father was dying. And on his deathbed he says, write for my daughter a ksuva 400 zuz. So 400 zuz. Or actually, I should say, we should be specific. Havu la arba mea zuz lebarti. Give my daughter, right, allocate for my daughter 400 zuz for a ksuva. Okay, so we'll say, so now this is a deathbed request. So shalach Rav Acha bereid Rav Avia lekamed Rav Ashi, arba mea di'inon tamni mea, or arba mea zuzi di'inon masan. So we'll say, what was the shaila? So assuming that we're dealing with a situation where it was common to inflate the value of the ksuva. And as we said before, sometimes it was even common even to double the amount of ksuva, sometimes to triple the amount of ksuva. So let's go with the idea where in this particular locale it was common to double the value of the ksuva. So we'll say, what's the shaila? So father on his deathbed says, give my daughter 400 zuz for a ksuva. So what was he saying? Was he saying an actual 400, which will then be recorded as 800 in the ksuva? Or no. Give her 400 to be recorded in the ksuva, which is actually what? 200. That's the shaila. Right? So is he giving her 400 zuz that will be recorded as 800 in the ksuva? Or is he giving her 200 zuz to be recorded as 400 zuz in the ksuva? Amr Rashi Chazinan. So Rashi says, well, let's look at what he said. I amar havu la arba mea zuzi di'inon tamnia mea zuzi. So I'll say, if he said give her 400 zuz, what that means is actually give her 400 zuz, which will then be recorded as 800 zuz in the ksuva. But if he said write 400 zuz, and I'll say, what does that mean? That means ultimately, again, di'inon masan. So I'll say that means really give her 200. So we'll see here the distinction. If he said give her 400, then what he's saying is, I want my daughter to have 400 zuz, which means that she'll record 800 zuz in the ksuva. If he said write for my daughter 400 zuz, that means he wants 400 zuz recorded in the ksuva, which means give her 200 zuz. Others explain, Amar Ravashi, Chazinan, I Amar Liksuvasa Arba Mea Zuzi Di'inan Tamni Mea. So let's say others say like this. So Ravashi had a different approach. He said, I Amar Liksuvasa Arba Mea Zuzi. If he said, give her for her ksuva 400 zuz, that means again, let the actual amount be 400, which will be recorded as 800. The Amar Biksuvasa Arba Mea Zuzi. So, but if he said, let there be 400 zuz ksuva, ultimately, again, that means 200 zuz. Velohi, the Gemara says, all of this is not true. Lo shna da Amar Liksuvasa, velo shna da Amar Biksuvasa, Arba Mea Zuzi, the Inan Masan. So we'll say, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if he says, Liksuvasa, Biksuvasa. Ultimately, again, either way, whatever he said, when he says 400 zuz, 400 zuz means that's the amount to be recorded in the ksuva, which means he's only giving her 200 zuz. Ad the amar havu la stama. They both say, if he says give her, but doesn't mention the ksuva, so give her means what? Give her means give her this amount of money, right? And that's the amount. The amount that I'm saying is the amount that I wanted to give her. Then you'll double that for the ksuva. The moment that he mentions ksuva in his words is that we look at the amount that he said as the inflated amount, which means 50% that is what he's actually giving to her. Incredible. Ho gaver the kabal ara mechavre. So there was a guy, right? So there was a guy who received land from his friend. This is a sharecropper. Amar, imo vrona la yahavni lecha alfa zuzi. So this is interesting. So in this case over here, the farmer said to the landowner, if I leave it fallow, I'll give you 1,000 zuz. In other words, if I don't do anything with this land, I'll give you 1,000 zuz. Ovir tilsa, so he ended up plowing a third of the land. Right, so he left 2/3 fallow, 1/3 he didn't. So Ardaim said, Dinahu, Diyav tlas mea tlasan tlasa tilusa. So ultimately, again, he should pay him 333 zuz, 1/3. 1/3, because he plowed 1/3 of the land. Rava says, Asmachtihi v'asmachta lo kanya. Rava says, no, such a statement like this, also you've seen this before, v'asmachta. Such a statement like this is an exaggerated statement. And in general, asmachta lo kanya, we'll say exaggerated statements, halacha l'maisa, don't create halachic realities. Well, Rava, maishna mehadisnan. So also according to Rava, ultimately, again, what's different about this than the Mishnah? Im ovir velo avid ashali b'metva. They both say this is our Mishnah. The Mishnah pretty much said this case explicitly, right? The Mishnah said that written into a sharecropping agreement is if I go ahead and I leave the field fallow, I agree to pay you from a good fee. So the Gemara says here's the difference. Hasam lo kagazim hacha kevan da'amar milsa yiserasa guzma ba'amahu dekagazim. So I'll say here's the difference. The difference is in the Mishnah's case there is no hyperbole. What he's saying is, if I leave the field fallow, ultimately again I agree to go ahead and pay you from the best of the field, which means what? We assess how much a field like this could have produced, what the landowner's percentage would be, and I make myself liable. So I'll say that's just basic liability. In this case that we just mentioned over here, he said I'll pay you 1,000 zuz. So I'll say that's hyperbolic. Where are you coming up with that? Where are you coming up with that? So because again, Abba said there's a certain sense or there's a feeling of maybe some level of exaggeration, that's going to be the case of asmachta, and that's ultimately again what we'll say asmachta lo kanya, that hyperbole will not go ahead and create a binding obligation. We'll say we're going to stop here for today. Just want to spend the last few moments just speaking a little bit about the Yom Tov of Shavuos. So we'll say just a few words, just to put us in the right mindset for Yom Tov. I will say there's so much to say in general about Shavuos, about Zman Matan Tarasenu. This Yom Tov when we celebrate that which makes us special and unique, and that which really concretized our identity as Klal Yisrael. If you think about it again, right, our identity as Klal Yisrael was not solidified upon Yetzias Mitzrayim. When we left Egypt, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, was started, but it really only became solidified and concretized and finalized at Matan Torah. When we said Nasa v'Nishma, and we signed on to this relationship, when we said Nasa v'Nishma, when we accepted Torah, that's when we became HaKadosh Baruch Hu's, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu became ours. That's the Anila Dodi v'Dodi Li. That's that reciprocal relationship really started by Kabbalah Torah. But I'll say, but in general, I think one of the things that we don't fully appreciate sometimes is exactly what does Torah do for us, right? We celebrate this Yom Tov where we receive the Torah. What am I celebrating? What is it that Torah truly represents? We'll say, I think obviously, again, since Shabbos, so our complete attention has been focused on the dramatic rescue mission of the hostages. And every day they're releasing more of the footage and more of the stories, and you hear just about the dramatic and heroic nature of this battle, and how the soldiers who rescued these hostages just had such tremendous siyata d'shmaya, such divine providence. There was a story that came out that I thought was such a heartbreaking story in the midst of all of this simcha. So one of the hostages who was rescued was a young man by the name of Almog Meir Jan. was 21 years old. What was incredible is this young man's father, Yossi Jan, died a few hours before his son was rescued. He mamish died a few hours before his son was rescued. And you think about this, like for just a moment, and there was an interview in the Times of Israel with this man's, with Almog Meir Jan's, his aunt. So his father's sister, Yossi Jan's sister. And she was speaking about that from the moment that his son was taken captive, like Yossi was glued to the television. He was trying to just find any piece of news about his son. He pretty much cut himself off from like everyone and everything. And she said, my brother died of a broken heart. He died of a broken heart. He died thinking that his son was lost forever. And she said, in the article, like, if he only could have held on for another few hours, he would have been reunited with his son. And I will say that notion of so many times in life, it's just about holding on for another few hours, right? We get into difficult situations in life, and salvation, it feels so far off, but it's not. It's not. It's so much closer than we think. But sometimes, like when you're in the thick of it, you feel like I'm never going to get out of this. There's never going to be like a pitaron. There's never a solution to my problems, and I just feel like so enveloped by difficulty, by darkness, by adversity, and sometimes like we just give up because we just feel that whatever I need, like that light, that salvation is so far off. And I will say, what we don't realize is the power of Torah. What does Torah give us? What does Torah give us? Torah gives us, David HaMelech said it best, right? What did David HaMelech say? Lulei sorascha shashuai azavadati ba'ani. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, had your Torah not given me delight, right? Delight. Really, had your Torah not given me strength, az avadati ba'ani, I would have perished in my suffering. I would have perished. I would have been gone long ago. Torah gives us staying power. Torah gives us strength. Torah gives us the ability to hold on. And I will say, how are we here after thousands of years of overwhelming adversity? How are we here after thousands of years of persecution? How are we here after thousands of years of just the worst brutal mistreatment at the hands of mankind? I will say, and it doesn't stop. The mistreatment. So like, there was an interview, I think it was on CNN, where I don't know, one of these people are just like poor excuse for human beings, was conducting this interview with someone in the government, and they were talking about the high Palestinian, the high civilian casualty rate, and this imbecile asked this person in the government, did the army warn the civilians before they went ahead and they rescued the hostages? And this person, I forgot who it was, like one of the spokespeople, with full composure, like such a mensch said, probably if we warned the people that we were coming in to get the hostages, they probably would have executed the hostages, would have defeated the purpose. But this is who we deal with. This is who's on the other side of the table. So persecution takes two forms. There's active persecution, and almost like there's an undercurrent of persecution that like your lives are worth less and you're worth less, that the world communicates to us day in and day out. How do we keep our heads high? And where's our staying power? I'll say the answer is Torah. Torah girds us with a sense of strength, and Torah girds us with ga'ava Yehudit, with a sense of Jewish pride. And Torah gives us a sense of purpose, and Torah gives us a sense of connection, and Torah gives us a sense of divinity, and Torah infuses our heart and our soul with an unbreakable spirit. It was true for David HaMelech, Lulei soras chashashuai az avadati ba'an Yechidish Baruch Hu. Had you not given me your Torah, I would have been lost long ago, because I would not have the strength to stand up to everything the world throws our way. So, you read this story of this father who died just hours before, having had the opportunity to be reunited with his beloved son who was held hostage for 8 months. Sometimes, like I said, we also feel like letting go. And sometimes we also feel like, are we ever going to navigate out of this unending maze of hatred and animosity and barbaric behavior? But then the Yom Tov of Shavuos comes along. Then the Koach of Naseh v'Nishma comes along. And I both say, the stronger we want to be, the more Torah we have to learn. The more we delve into this, the more we lose ourselves and immerse ourselves in the Yam Shel Torah, in the Sea of Torah. I both say, the stronger we are. Torah doesn't just arm us with knowledge, doesn't just tell us what to do and what not to do, but Torah gives us the strength to continue to navigate through life. Torah gives us the strength to continue to keep our heads held high. Torah gives us the strength to continue to hold on. We should be Zocheh Me'er Tashem this Yom Tov of Shavuos to renew our commitment, to renew our relationship, to immerse in the beautiful waters of Torah even just a little bit more. And that's chus. May we be girded with the strength to continue to be successful and to hold on, to continue to hold on until that great day, that great day of Mashiach, that great day of Geula, and may we be Zocheh to it Mihira B'Yameinu. Amen. All right, Chevron Zoom, a good yantiv, everyone. A good yantiv, a good yantiv. Beautiful yantiv of Kabbalah star for all of us. Hallelujah, should be Zocheh Me'er Hashem to be there together.